The Midnight Game is an old pagan ritual used mainly as punishment for those who had broken the laws of the pagan religion in question. While it was mainly used as a scare tactic to not disobey the gods, there is still a very existent chance of death to those who play the Midnight Game. There is an even higher chance of permanent mental scarring. It is highly recommended that you do not play the Midnight Game. However, for those few thrill seekers searching for a rush, or for those delving into obscure occult rituals, these are simple instructions on how to play. Do so at your own risk. It must be exactly 12 a.m. when you begin performing the ritual. Otherwise, it will not work. You will need a candle, a piece of paper, a writing implement, matches or a lighter, salt, a wooden door, and at least one drop of your own blood. If you are playing with multiple people, they will need their own set of the aforementioned materials, and they will have to perform the steps accordingly. Step 1. Write your full name, first, middle, and last, on the piece of paper. Put at least one drop of your blood on the paper and allow it to soak. Step 2. Turn off all of the lights in the place you are doing this. Go to the wooden door and place the piece of paper with your name on it in front of the door. Now, take out the candle and light it and place it on top of the paper. Step 3. Knock on the door 22 times. The hour must be 12 a.m. upon the final knock. Then, open the door, blow out the candle, and close the door. You have just allowed the Midnight Man to enter your house. Step 4. Immediately relight your candle. This is where the game begins. You must now lurk around your completely dark house with the lit candle in your hand. Your goal is to avoid the Midnight Man at all costs until 3:33 a.m. Should your candle ever go out, that means the Midnight Man is near you, and you must relight your candle in the next 10 seconds. If you are not successful in doing this, you must then immediately surround yourself with a circle of salt. If you are unsuccessful in both of your actions, the Midnight Man will create a hallucination of your greatest fear and rip out your organs one by one. You will feel it, but you will be unable to react. If you are successful in creating the circle of salt, you must remain in there until 3:33 a.m. If you are successful in relighting your candle, you must proceed with the game. You must continue to 3:33 a.m. without being attacked by the Midnight Man or being trapped inside the circle of salt to win the Midnight Game. The Midnight Man will leave your house at 3:33 a.m. and you will be safe to proceed with your morning. Indications that you are near the Midnight Man will include a sudden drop in temperature, seeing a pure black humanoid figure through the darkness, and hearing very soft whispering coming from an indiscernible source. If you experience any of these, it is advised that you leave the area to avoid the Midnight Man. Do not turn on any of the lights during the Midnight Game. Do not use a flashlight during the Midnight Game. Do not go to sleep during the Midnight Game. Do not attempt to use another person's blood on your name. Do not use a lighter as a substitute for a candle. It will not work. And definitely, do not attempt to provoke the Midnight Man in any way. Even when the game is over, he will always be watching you. Good luck. You're going to need it. My first thought was that my medication had suddenly and severely stopped working. It was really the only rational explanation at the time. I want to start out with that because, before I explain myself, I want you to know why it's taken me this long to take action. You see, I have a condition. Well, maybe that's not the word most people would choose. I suppose most people would say that I'm batshit crazy, and to tell the truth, I wouldn't blame them. But that's not really fair. When I'm on my medication, I'm pretty much normal. Eccentric, yes, but nothing for worry. It's taken me years to get this far. A multitude of failed prescription cocktails and over a dozen institutions. But what I tell you next is true, is real, and is, more importantly, urgent. I know that knowledge of my past will work against me, but please, try to look past that and see me for who I am now. Do I sound mad? Do I sound irrational? Ask yourself these things as you listen, and ask yourself, what would you have done? It occurred roughly 8 months ago. I worked the graveyard shift at a 7-Eleven in Chicago. Unfortunately, with my sort of past, it's one of the only jobs available, but it's an honest living and it gets the bills paid. But I digress. One of the benefits of living in the city is that I'm walking distance from my apartment, so there's no need for a car. As I was walking home, my cell phone went off. I remember thinking it was strange, since it was a little after 4 in the morning, but I wasn't too alarmed. My friends and family know I work the graveyard, so there was a good chance it was someone I know being polite and not interrupting my sleep during the day. Whoever it was hung up before I could answer, and I couldn't call back because the number was listed as private. Shrugging it off, I continued on, only to have it ring as I got to my apartment door. This time, I answered in time, but the line was so filled with static that I couldn't make anything out. That's all that happened that night. They may seem mundane and unimportant, but it isn't. It happened again the next night, the next, and has happened every night since then, including last night. And I'm sure it'll happen tonight. It was the first sign that something had gone wrong, but I didn't know it until 4 days later. I assumed that someone was just prank calling my phone every night, but when I went to see my sister that weekend, I found my second sign. My sister lives in the suburbs, has been happily married for the last 8 years, and has a 3-year-old son named Francis. It's become something of a tradition that I take a taxi over to her place for dinner once or twice a month, so my showing up on a weekend unannounced shouldn't have been a surprise, but when I got there, her house was empty. Ah, I can tell. You don't understand. When I say her house was empty, I mean it was empty, deserted. Nobody was there, and there were no signs of people having ever been there. There was no furniture, no locks on the door, and no light fixtures. Just bare walls with exposed outlets and bare floors. I told you of my condition earlier. While I had never had this sort of hallucination before, I knew better than to think of what I saw was real. An entire family just disappearing in the middle of suburbia doesn't make sense. So, the logical thought was that they hadn't disappeared. I just wasn't seeing reality as it was. I called another taxi, went home, and called my psychiatrist. 3 days and innumerable blood tests later, it was declared that my medication was still at full strength in my bloodstream, and that perhaps I had dreamed the whole thing. It was worth noting that at that point, I had tried calling my sister several times and only received a wrong number message with no immediate options available. I decided to take a friend to see my sister's house. If nothing else, I would at least have someone to confirm that it was empty. I should note again that this started with receiving phone calls. The day I decided to enlist the help of a friend, the number of calls doubled. I don't have many friends, and of the friends I do have, there aren't many who are aware of my condition, so I didn't have many options to choose from. I eventually decided on Lisa. She knew the most about my past, the most about my problem, and I knew I could trust her not to judge. While I called her, she told me that I was dumb to have waited that long to call her and to get my ass over there so my life could get back to normal. God, I miss Lisa. She was always so good to me. I headed over to her place that evening only to discover it empty as well. Since then, everyone I know has disappeared, one by one, and the damn phone calls have continued to plague me. I threw away my cell phone months ago, but to no avail. Payphones ring as I pass. I find cell phones in my pockets. The type always varies, but the end is always the same. Ringing. The world continues on though, even though every last house I come to looks as if it's never seen a living soul. When I pass a street vendor's empty shop, I can still pick up a paper with today's date and a new story. That's why I'm writing this. If the world can still talk to me, then maybe I can still talk to it. Maybe I can still send out a message, and it is a very important message. You see, I don't care so much about the loneliness. I don't even care that much about the prospect of never seeing another living creature again. I care about warning the outside world. Reading the papers has become an obsession of mine, and I've come to realize something. It isn't the world that's disappeared. It's me. I also know why I haven't been missed. You see, I didn't just vanish without a trace. I was replaced. I don't know what it was that replaced me, but it doesn't have good intentions. When I said earlier that I'm okay with the prospect of never seeing another living soul again, I meant it. But every time I open up one of the cell phones that appears in my pockets, I'm greeted by an image of my hand clutching a knife and a slit throat. It's been roughly 8 months, and I've seen thousands of cell phones. The story you're about to hear is one that has been, for the last 70 years, left to wither in the hearts of those few who recall it. Of the 12 of us present that day, only I remain, and my own end is rapidly approaching. I write this tale with shaky hand, solely in order to console myself in these final moments, and I hope anyone who may discover this document will refrain from judgment upon me and my comrades until the end. I distinctly recall sitting in a tent with my fellow soldiers just outside of Berlin, huddling around a shortwave radio and listening to the trials of our nation's greatest foes. They feigned insanity, pled guilty, gave harrowing accounts of every detail and every single crime committed by their hand or under their watch. My favorites, however, were the ones who pled innocent, the ones who said, "I was just following orders." I had to wonder what I would say. Had the war ended with Moscow under the Iron Eagle, what would I say? If asked to justify my actions in war, I believe I know exactly what I would say. And it would be the same as the men being cheered at by the entire Red Army, excluding the 10 of us gathered in the tent. You see, the 2 luckiest of us had already died. It was a quiet village in eastern Germany, December 24th, 1944. We were under orders to seek out any soldiers lying in wait to ambush the main column of the army. Our sergeant, Ivan, took the lead, the rest of us falling in behind him. It was raining heavily, obscuring our vision. A sharp crack jerked me to attention, and I immediately fell to my stomach. I smelled smoke and heard a thump in the dirt a dozen feet ahead of me. The sound of gunfire roared in my ears as we returned fire. We had no idea where the shot had come from, so each among us took our best guess and fired in that direction. We knew we would not hit the shooter, but we had hoped to scare him off. I decided to hold my fire in order to cover my comrades as they reloaded their weapons. When the gunfire stopped, I watched carefully by the nearby houses. A quick movement by a roadside fence caught my eye, and I quickly shot off a couple rounds at the dark mass. At least one of my shots must have landed, because whatever it was fell to the ground, unmoving. By now, my fellow soldiers had finished reloading, and so I ejected my magazine and slid a new one into its place. We were still for some time, waiting for the returning fire. When it never came, Ivan came up to a crouch and quietly walked over to the corpse. He felt the pulse and then returned to us. "Yes, we got him," he said. In his eyes, I saw something I hadn't seen before, a kind of deep sadness and regret. No matter how I pushed, he would not tell me why. We stood and casually walked over to the house where the shooter had come from. Ivan knocked on the door. We waited a moment, and Ivan firmly planted his foot on the floor, rearing to kick the door down. When a shotgun blast blew through the door, Ivan fell to the ground, riddled with buckshot. We returned fire through the door, then swiftly beat it down with the stock of our rifles. Inside, broken glass littered the floor and bullet holes scattered along the walls. On the ground was a young woman, shot fatally 4 times. In her hand, the shotgun that killed Ivan. We had had more than enough of this village. We ransacked the house, throwing over tables and filling our pockets with valuables. When we had finished, we threw gas lamps onto the floor and tossed matches on the pooling liquid. We left the house on fire. It was only once we were outside again that we heard the wailing. By then, the flames had taken hold, and it was too late to re-enter the building. The mother had hidden her babe before turning to fight us, and we hadn't found it before torching the house. The wails continued for just a few minutes before falling silent among the crackling of flames. A man burst from a building down the street and sprinted towards us, screaming in German. Our translator gaped at him, and when we raised our rifles, he held up his hand to stop us. The German man shoved past us and up to the burning building. He hesitated only briefly at the doorway before running through. He didn't come back out. By the time the fire had died, we couldn't see it anymore. The rest of our mission went by in silence. When we doubled back to where we came, we found people standing in the street, staring at us. Some were angry, some were sad, but most had just a blank stare. I still see it in my nightmares. When we passed the house, I stopped. I announced to no one in particular that I had to take a leak. No one believed it, but that didn't matter. I stepped into the shell of the house we had destroyed. There, on the floor, in the bedroom, I saw the skeleton of a man crushed under a wooden beam, a smaller collection of misshapen bones in his arms. In the yard by the fence, I saw a little boy with a toy gun, dressed in the oversized uniform of a German soldier. That night, we all had nightmares. The man, with his wild eyes, told each of us that he would be back for us, one after the other. The next day, we had laughed it off together. We had thrown ourselves into our duties. We had fought hard not to think about the screaming man and the wailing baby. One by one, as the years went by, we died. Here, one of us fell from a tower we were constructing. There, an aggressive form of cancer that suddenly appeared in the brain. Never obvious, but always suspicious to us because we knew. We all knew what was happening. When there were 2 of us, just Joseph and I, he had come to visit me. When he had knocked, I thought my time had come, but I should have known I would be last. "He's coming for me," Joseph had said. "It is my time now." I would have liked to console him, to assure him it was all a coincidence, but we both knew better. That night, Joseph cried on my shoulder, and I, on his. "I am so sorry," he had sobbed. "I didn't know." The next day, he shot himself in his apartment. That was 1 week ago, and now it is my turn. I know he is coming. Every night in my sleep, he gazes into my eyes and smiles. He smiles wider. Last night, he began to speak, quietly, so quiet I could not hear any of what he says, other than make out that he is speaking. I don't want to hear what he has to say. I cannot sleep tonight. I will stay up as late as possible, and before I sleep, I will climb to the roof and stand on the edge. I must. I cannot know what he will say. They shot at us. The woman killed Ivan. We couldn't have known about the baby. We were just eliminating the resistance. That's all. We were only following orders. Only following orders. Like most people, I had a sad childhood. Who doesn't these days? My father left before I was born, and my mother was on drugs from the day she brought me home. She slipped right back into her party lifestyle and turned our apartment into an opium den. I walked around in a drug-fueled haze for the first 5 years of my life. The smoky air flooded down the hallway and under my door and seemed to linger for days. My mother wasn't a bad person, just a victim of her addictions. When she did have spare money, she would put food in the house and even sometimes buy me clothes from Goodwill. The only pieces of furniture I had in my room were a box spring and mattress set and a little blue and white toy chest. Not that I had a lot of toys to put in it, just the 3 I'd gotten for the birthdays. One was an art kit, one was a red wagon, and the last, my pride and joy, was a doll named Betsy. Betsy was my best friend. We would have imaginary tea parties together, sleep together, take baths together, and sometimes I remember her speaking to me. Thinking about Betsy in adulthood has led me to believe that I was a severely traumatized child who was often high on opium, and therefore my memories were extremely unreliable. Still, I remember the sound of her voice, a high-pitched, tinkled lilt. And I remember the things she wanted me to do. Steal food for her, bring her forks, bring her knives, hit the bad man who slept on our couch. Always bad things that would get me in trouble. I would blame it on Betsy, but my mother would never believe me. Adults never do. Around my 6th birthday, I asked my mother for a birthday party. I wanted to invite the not nice girls from school, serve them cake, make them like me. I still remember standing in the kitchen with such high hopes, a glass bottle of soda shaking in my hand as I held my breath and awaited my mother's answer. She turned to me and laughed. "A birthday party? Laura, that's ridiculous. I can't afford to feed 15 other children that aren't even mine. I can barely afford to feed you. You eat like an elephant, or should I say, little Betsy does. I barely get anything to eat around here." My face fell as she shook her head, mumbled something, and stumbled off. I heard the music go up in the living room as more people walked in the door. Some left, some stayed. I knew none of them. My mother threw parties all the time. What about me? I was a child. All my friends had birthday parties, and now the mean girls would know I was too poor to have one, and they would tease me even more. I felt tears start to swell, and I ran into my room and slammed the door. Betsy was lying on the bed and smiling. She was always smiling. How could I forget? Just staring at me, smiling. She was going to tell me to do something bad, like steal more food or worse. This was her fault. Betsy didn't have to go to school. Betsy never got in trouble like I did. And, in my 5-year-old little brain, I truly believed it was the doll, not my mother, who was the source of all my woes. I screamed in anger and threw the bottle as hard as I could at the bed. It hit Betsy, and she fell on the floor. I laughed. I dragged her into the bathroom and threw her into our bathtub, which had always had water in it because the drains were all clogged. Of course, she didn't fight back while she was underwater, but it made me feel better. A few minutes later, after I had finished taking out my anger and humiliation on my favorite toy, I threw her in the toy chest and slammed it shut. I kicked the chest against the wall. I never wanted to see Betsy again. I never owned another doll after that. About a week later, the police came and 2 nice ladies took me to live in a new home, in a new state, with food and toys and no drugs. The trunk went into storage and the wagon disappeared. I never saw my mother again. As I got older, my foster parents admitted she was in jail, doing 25 years. I felt nothing for her anyways. I was still having nightmares because of the life she had given me. I focused on doing well in school and ignored her letters from prison. She reached out to me several times in my teens, but I always denied her calls. That is, until this morning. I'm 30 now, with my own children and a husband who loves me deeply. I have a beautiful house, 2 dogs, and a career as a social worker, trying to make a difference for kids who had it bad like me. So, when I got a voicemail from my mother, letting me know she had been paroled and wished to speak, I felt stable enough to let her say her piece. Since the kids were home from school, I went out into our shed in the backyard to return my mother's call. The shed was the children's domain, and they used to play in it all summer. I sat on my old toy chest, which was currently being used as a tea party table, and dialed the number she had left me. 3 rings. Hello? Laura? Hello, Mother. How are you? Oh, Laura. Thank you for speaking to me. I know you have your own life and family now. I would love to meet them someday. I just wanted to tell you how sorry I am for everything. You're not going to meet my kids, ever. I'm going to say my piece here too. The drugs destroyed you, and you took me down alongside you. Honestly, I'm surprised it took you so long to get caught. I'm not sure what you mean about being caught, Laura. I honestly know nothing. Look, it hardly matters. I do understand why you would feel that way. Why you would hate me and not want me to meet your little ones. I learned a lot about Jesus and forgiveness while I was away, and just... Oh, Laura. I'm so sorry about Betsy. Betsy? I paused, confused. Why would you care about her? I know, Laura. Believe me, I do. It was all my fault. The drugs and Betsy. Oh God. If I had only been able to see through the haze. If I had only known. She's gone forever. It's all my fault. As my mother began to cry, I tapped my fingers on the toy box impatiently. The drugs had clearly fried my mother's brain. Mother, why are you talking about Betsy? Why do you even care? I know where Betsy is, right underneath me. You do? What are you talking about, Laura? Oh God, where is she? I shifted uncomfortably. Betsy is in the trunk. I honestly thought she had hung up. I heard nothing on the other end. Not even breathing. What do you mean your sister's in the trunk? Sister? What the hell are you talking about? Back on drugs so soon, Mother? Betsy's a goddamn doll. I locked her in a toy box a few days before you got arrested for opium possession. Laura. Oh God. No, Laura. I wasn't arrested because of the drugs. I was arrested because of Betsy's disappearance. You always called her your little doll, but we all thought you knew. Oh God. What did you do? Laura, what did you do to my baby? With no emotion, I set the phone next to me and stood up. I can hear the distant sound of my mother's anguished cries and feel the dark clutch of agony in my own chest. Memories were stirring in the back of my mind, threatening to come flooding forward into my consciousness. Pushing against the door in my head, a door that had been locked so tightly for so long, I had forgotten it was there. Could the trauma and the drugs have really led me to believe that a small child was actually a doll? Asking for food, asking for utensils to eat with, asking me to protect her from the bad man. No. I slowly turned around and brought my eyes down to the chest. Surely it was too small. You couldn't fit a person in there. You couldn't. But what about a very small, starving, emaciated child? What about her? If I were an investigator, Looking for a child, I would never consider looking in this chest. It was just too small. I knelt down to the ground and unclipped the clasps. It would be better not to look. After all that I had overcome, this new life that I had earned, it could be all undone by opening this toy box. I shouldn't open it. I should throw it in a landfill and forget it ever existed. I should not look inside. I opened the chest. It never had a doll. My mother could not afford to buy me one. I never had a wagon either, but I did have a toy box, a pretty blue and white toy box. And when I was 5, I drowned my 2-year-old sister and put her in it. And now my life is ruined. I work at a gas station in rural Pennsylvania. It's a boring job, but it's pretty easy, and it pays all right. A few weeks ago, this new guy started. I'll call him Jeremy. Jeremy's weird. He's about 25 or 26, and he hardly speaks, but he's got the creepiest laugh I've ever heard. My boss and I have both noticed this, but it's never been a problem, so there's not much we can do about it. Customers have never complained about him, and he's always done his job fairly well. Up until a few weeks ago, anyway. That's when things started going missing. Employee theft can be a problem at any business that sells consumer goods, and there's only one person working at a time at the gas station. It's a pretty small place. About 2 weeks ago, my boss started noticing that we were short on motor oil. At first, it was a few containers at a time, then entire shelves and boxes from the back room. Pretty soon, entire shipments would be gone the day after we got them, and it would always be right after Jeremy's shifts. My bosses checked the security camera tapes from every single night he worked, but he could never catch him in the act. Jeremy would lock up at closing, then the motor oil would be gone the next day. My boss usually takes the tapes home with him to try and catch Jeremy stealing, but his daughter had a softball game last night, so he asked me to watch the tape for him. He offered to pay me overtime, under the table, so obviously, I took that offer. There are 3 cameras, so he gave me 3 different tapes to check. I figured it would be a long night, but I'm trying to save up for vacation, so I really need the money. I took the tapes home, popped them in the old VCR, and sat back. 2 days ago, the last time he worked, Jeremy started at 4 p.m. Everything seemed pretty normal at first. He counted up his drawer, switched off with the girl who was working before him, and waited for a customer. The first person who came in was Miss Templeton. The timestamp on the video read 4:03, a regular. She picked up her cigarettes and her newspaper and paid with a 20. Nothing unusual there. The next customer was some local guy named Ron. He drives a motorcycle, usually comes in every few days. He filled up his tank, got a bag of beef jerky, paid with his credit card, and then left. Next was some guy with a cowboy hat. I'd never seen him before, but we get plenty of strangers passing through, just like at any gas station. He got $40 worth of diesel fuel, paid with a full $100 bill, and went on his way. I sat back inside. The only thing more boring than doing this job is watching someone else do it. My boss's offer was enough to keep me watching though, so I left the tape on. Everything seemed pretty normal. I had a feeling that if Jeremy was stealing motor oil, he knew we were suspicious of him by now. I didn't expect him to be dumb enough to let us catch him on camera. Things stayed boring and routine until about 5 o'clock. At 5:03, Miss Templeton came back in. She must have forgotten something, but she didn't. She bought the same pack of cigarettes as before, and the same newspaper, so she paid with another 20. That's odd, I thought, but then again, she's a little absent-minded. I thought Jeremy should have told her she already got her smokes. but it's not against the rules to sell somebody the same thing twice. That's when Ron came in again. He bought another tank of gas for his motorcycle again. I later checked the outdoor camera because I thought he had another car he wanted to fill up, and the same bag of beef jerky. He paid with his credit card again. No big deal. I figured this was just a weird coincidence. Miss Templeton is forgetful, and Ron probably owns more than one Harley. That's when the guy in the cowboy hat came back in. I felt a chill run down my spine. Don't get diesel. Don't get diesel. I found myself whispering to my empty living room, but he did. He got $40 worth of diesel and paid with another $100 bill. Every move he made was identical to his first visit, right down to the way he scratched his nose before he walked out. Either this guy is rich, owns a lot of trucks, and just moved into town, or something really bizarre was happening. I kept watching. Every customer for the next hour was the same as before, every single one. I was seriously freaked out, and then, at 6:03, Miss Templeton walked back in. She brought her cigarettes and newspaper again, and paid with a 20 again. I thought I was going to lose it. I only watched another half hour before I started fast forwarding through the rest of it. It was all the same. Every customer would come in at the exact same times, exactly 1 hour apart. Now I know what you're thinking. That sneaky motherfucker Jeremy had messed with the tapes. He had run a loop of his first 4 hours of business over and over. That wasn't the case. There are windows around the cash register area that the camera covers, and I watched the sunlight fade as time ran on. Jeremy's routine didn't loop over. He swept, mopped, restocked, and did all his duties exactly how you would expect. But the same customers kept coming in. I was panicking at this point. Something was seriously wrong with what I was seeing, and I had no explanation for it. I skipped ahead to when he locked up and walked out to his car. He hadn't stolen anything, but I kept watching, just to make sure. I fast-forwarded one last time, to about midnight. At exactly 12:03, out of nowhere, Jeremy's face pops up on camera. I didn't mean he moved his head into view. I mean that 1 second, the store was empty. The next, his face was all I could see. He wasn't looking at the camera. He was looking at me. I was sure of it. I screamed and fumbled for the remote. By the time I grabbed it, he was gone. Just as soon as he had left. One frame he was there, the next he wasn't. My hands were shaking like crazy, but I popped in another tape. The other indoor camera shows the back area, by the cash register. I would be able to see how he got up to put his face in the camera like that. I skipped ahead to 12:03, but there was nothing. I would have been able to see him standing on a chair or something on this tape, but he wasn't there. I didn't see him enter the store at all after he left. It's like he wasn't really there. He doesn't know the security code, and no alarms were triggered that night after he locked up. What I did see, however, was that at 12:03, the motor oil vanished off the shelf. All of it. Same as Jeremy's face. 1 second it was there, and the next it wasn't. I turned that tape off and went to bed, but I didn't get a wink of sleep. My body is exhausted right now, but my mind is racing. The tape was undoubtedly the creepiest, most disturbing thing I've seen in my life. I work in a few hours. My boss had asked me to bring the tapes back in and let him know what I found. But really, what the hell am I going to say? Jeremy works the night shift directly after me, and the plan is for my boss to come in just before I leave and confront him with me as if I'm supposed to be the one who caught him stealing. I have no idea what I'm going to do. I suppose I have to show my boss the tapes, but I don't want to watch them with him. I never want to see anything like that again. I can't get the image of Jeremy just smiling directly into the camera out of my mind. It was the creepiest look I had ever seen on another human being's face. Anyway, I'm going to try to get some last-minute sleep before I go in and deal with this. I'll let you guys know what happens. Update, 2:49 p.m. Updating from my phone. Apologies in advance for errors. My boss just finished watching the last of the tapes. I told him what to expect, but you really can't prepare someone for something like that. He's scared shitless. I am too. And Jeremy is due to come in at 4. We got a little over an hour to get our shit together, but neither one of us knows what to say to him. Is he just a fucked up guy who likes to steal motor oil and scare the shit out of people? Or is he something else? I don't know if this is crazy, but does anyone think he could have anything to do with the time loop? My boss said he never noticed anything like that in the other tapes, but the way he popped up in this one made me think he knew I was watching. It's like he wanted me to see what he can do, like he was showing off or something. The way he smiled into the camera was like a little kid showing you a sandcastle they just built or something. I don't know. I probably sound crazy. I sure feel the part. I'm going to talk to my boss some more. We have to calm ourselves down and figure out how to handle this. I'll update again tonight, but I have a really bad feeling about how this is going to play out. Update, 4:33 p.m. No sign of Jeremy. Tried calling him, but his phone has been disconnected. We're calling the police. Update, 5:33 p.m. No sign of Jeremy. Tried calling him, but his phone is disconnected. We're calling the police. Update, 6:33 p.m. No sign of Jeremy. Tried calling him, but his phone has been disconnected. We're calling the police. Update, 7:33 p.m. No sign of Jeremy. Tried calling him, but his phone has been disconnected. We're calling the police. Update, 8:33 p.m. No sign of Jeremy. Tried calling him, but his phone has been disconnected. We're calling the police. Update, 10:58 p.m. Holy shit. Holy shit, holy shit, holy shit. I just got home and saw my previous updates. Things make less sense now than ever. Here's what I can tell you. I went to work. Jeremy never showed up. My boss and I decided to call the police, as you are well aware. When I picked up the phone to call, the sun went out. I shit you not. That's what I thought happened. Apparently, I blacked out for exactly 5 hours, because when I looked at the clock, it was 9:33. I think I got stuck in Jeremy's time loop, and then I snapped out of it exactly at the point I blacked out, if that makes sense. But that's when things got really weird. My boss was right next to me when I blacked out, ready to corroborate my story with the cops. When I came to, the phone was in my hand, but it was dead. Not even a dial tone. My boss was still right there, but he wasn't moving. He was standing up, but frozen. I looked at the clock again, and it wasn't moving. The second hand was stuck on 12. It was 9:33 exactly. The clock on the register computer screen wasn't moving either. My phone was frozen. There was even a customer at the register, waiting for my boss to give him cigarettes. I'm betting that would have been his 5th pack of this day. I got the fuck out of there. Didn't lock up. Didn't turn the lights off. And sorry guys, I didn't grab the security tapes to upload to the internet. Believe me, that was the last thing on my mind. The gas station is on a major highway, and cars were parked all along it. Except they weren't parked, they were frozen. The people inside were still sitting. The people inside were sitting still as wax figures. I got in my car and prayed that it would start. Thankfully, it did. About halfway home, time started up again. The static from the radio turned into music, like it's supposed to be. And from what I could tell by listening to the host talk in between songs, no one noticed the time freeze, or whatever it was. I was the only one. Well, I'm sure Jeremy noticed as well. I still have no clue where he is, or what he's doing. I'm hiding in my room and calling the police again in the morning. I don't know if I ever got through to them before, or if I did, whether they took me seriously. I'm scared of my life at this point. I'll update tomorrow if I can. Final update, 10:33 a.m. I finally fell asleep last night around 4. I have no idea how I did it. I guess exhaustion finally got the best of me. This morning, I woke up to my phone ringing. It was my boss. He'd been calling me since about 6. He woke up when time turned back on last night and immediately called the cops. They came by to see what was wrong and he told them everything. The police around here are all small-time guys. They were more concerned about the missing motor oil than anything, but my boss figured he would take it, as long as he had their attention. They decided to go looking for Jeremy. We keep all our employees' applications on file, and since Jeremy just started working here, his was easy to find. They checked the address on it and headed over to his house. You're not going to believe what they found. The address Jeremy listed on the application was an empty lot, or at least now it is. There used to be a house there, but it burned down in 1993. Being a small town, almost everyone remembers that fire. A family of 4 used to live there way back when. Rumor has it that they had an estranged son who they never really talked about, but I can't say for sure if that's true. What I can say is true is that after an insurance investigation, the fire was ruled as an arson. The entire house was soaked in oil and torched with a Molotov cocktail. The entire family was sleeping when it happened. None of them survived. They never caught the guy who did it. Rumor has it that when they tried to contact the estranged son, no one could find him. Anyway, my boss called me and told me this, and I freaked out. Then he asked me to come to the gas station. "What are you, crazy?" I said, but he assured me that the cops were there with him. Then he dropped a bomb. The FBI were also in town, and they were going to talk to me one way or another, so I might as well come in. It was about 7:15, and I wanted to go back to bed, but I figured I wouldn't be able to get sleep much more anyway, so I went down. 4 men in suits greeted me and told me to have a seat. We went over everything 2 or 3 times until they got all the details down. I told them about Jeremy, the security tape, last night at work, everything. Finally, after I finished, one of the agents said, "Oh Christ, we got another one on our hands." Then, they made me sign a bunch of papers saying I wouldn't tell anyone about what happened, so I can't say much more. I might be breaking the law by posting this. So now I'm home. I'm not sure what to do with myself. The agent's words when I told him the story are going to haunt me for the rest of my life. Anyways, I've got to go. I have some errands to run today, and then I have to go into work to pick up some tapes. My boss and I think this new guy Jeremy, he's a complete creep, is stealing motor oil, and I have to watch security footage to see if I can catch him doing it. I have better things to do, but my boss is paying me overtime, under the table, and I'm trying to save up for this vacation so I can really use the money. It should be pretty simple. The oil always goes missing right after his shifts. I figure I'll just watch the tapes, catch him in the act, and that will be that. Having difficulty staying awake there? Trying to study for some big exam? Finish some last-minute assignment that you've put off all weekend, and it's now 3 in the morning and you're absolutely exhausted? Or perhaps you were in a similar state recently and are looking for help on what to do. Well, friend, I have just a prescription to ease your weary mind. All you need to do is win a game. Setting up the game is relatively simple. All you need is an hourglass, a candle, and a marker. Let me make one thing specifically clear. You need an hourglass. Not one of those rinky-dink 30-second pieces of shit you get out of a cereal box or a board game. Before playing the game, test your hourglass to make sure it takes an hour or slightly longer to drain out all of the sand from one section to the other. Having it take slightly longer will help, but too long or too short and you'll run into complications during the game. You must also be completely alone in the room while playing. When you are ready to play, choose any room that can be sealed, simply meaning that all doorways and windows can be closed. Any other form of timekeeping device or alarm must be taken out of the room prior, or the game will not begin. The hourglass will be your only time tracking tool, hence why having an accurate hourglass is important. Anything with an electronic display should also be removed. This includes TVs, cell phones, computer monitors, anything. Leaving them in the room during the game will put you at a massive disadvantage. You may begin the game at 8 p.m. Make sure the room is sealed, drawing the curtains to block any outside light. Then, draw a simplistic hourglass shape on the back of one of your hands. Make sure to remember well which hand it is, since you'll mostly be in the dark for this game. Take the candle and light it. Then, turn off the lights and sit on the floor with the 3 previously mentioned objects close together and flip the hourglass so the sand begins to fall into the empty half. The only source of light should be your candle. Now, yell something along the lines of, "I'm not tired and I refuse to go to sleep." Close your eyes to the count of 10 and open them again. You won't be entirely sure, but somewhere in the room, you'll think you can see the shadowy outline of a man. You have now begun the game, and your opponent is none other than the Master of Sleep himself, the Sandman. Do not provoke him, and do not speak to him either. You've challenged him, and in a way, insulted him about his profession, so he's not in the best moods to say the least. Now comes the game. Your task is to stay awake as long as possible, to a maximum of 8 hours, which will take you to 4 a.m. Every hour, you must flip the hourglass to reset it and keep the game going. Each time you flip the hourglass, you may take the marker and draw a tally mark on your arm. The specifics of which arm you mark will be explained later, and don't think you can just flip the hourglass 8 times really quickly, or just draw 8 lines on your arm. The hour needs to pass in order for the magic to work. If you fail to flip the hourglass before the very last grain of sand falls, or you succumb to sleep, you will lose. During this time, the Sandman will be deploying as many tricks as possible to get you to fall asleep or to give in. See, the bottom half of your hourglass, at any time, represents his power. The more sand in it, the stronger his influence will be. Almost immediately upon starting, you'll begin to feel drowsy. This is merely his presence. If you can't last this long, stop playing immediately. During the first hour, he won't do a lot. He may walk around the room, but he won't touch you or speak to you. Even if you try talking to the being, which is something you should really avoid doing, there will be no response. Also, don't move from your spot to approach him. The closer you get, the more drowsy you'll become. And if you're not near the candle, he may put it out so you can go to sleep. Do not distract yourself during this time. You may easily lose track of time and forget to flip the hourglass on time. The Sandman can also skew your perception of how much time has passed, but he cannot affect the hourglass, so keeping focus on that is your best chance of winning. Side note, if you try to leave the room, you'll find that the doors are locked and the windows reveal nothing but an unyielding darkness as far as you can see. After you pass the first hour, the Sandman may scoff, but will continue to stay in the room. Now, he will begin to pull more from his bag of tricks. He's seen that you're going to be a hard one to put down. The sounds of music boxes and harps may be heard, at first from a distance, but will slowly grow to a level that would be audible and comforting. Resist the urge to close your eyes and listen. Your body will begin to grow weary as you approach hour 2 or 3, depending on how the Sandman is feeling that night. Around this point, he will begin speaking to you in many voices. The soft voice of a young girl, the wise cackling laugh of a grandparent, or perhaps even in the ever-loving recognizable words of your own mother. They will try to congratulate you on surviving for so long with the Sandman, for braving sleepless days and nights to win this game. Whispers of lullabies and nursery rhymes will fill your head, but you know better. Say nothing and ignore the voices. No matter how real they may seem, don't listen to them. Do not go to sleep. If you manage to make it to the halfway point and now have 4 marks on your arm, you'll be nothing less than exhausted, and the Sandman will be nothing less than enraged. He will begin to manipulate your environment even more and start using new tactics to get you to sleep. Instead of trying to lull you to sleep, he will attack you. Hallucinations will occur. You'll see horrifying images of the dead hanging from the ceiling, flashed by a spotlight of unknown origin. The room may start to close in, and then stretch out, and close in again, and stretch back out. A whisper in your ear will turn into shouting in your face from an invisible source. Already weakened and sleep deprived, your remaining energy will be drained in bursts from his terrors. You may have sudden adrenaline rushes, sure, but the Sandman is clever. He'll just time them so you can't just survive to the next hour by simply being anxious. He'll wait until your emotional state has fallen just another level lower, and then bam, 2 rotted feet dangling in front of your face. You can scream all you want. You can beg for him to stop, but this will only use up more of your ability to function. At the 6-hour mark, the hallucinations will shift between horror and comfort. While the Sandman will begin to pick at your brain to find what nightmares cause you to come to a cold sweat many a night, others will coax you towards a slumber, claiming that you've put up with enough and that you deserve your rest. A warm bed to tuck yourself into, a pillow made from the softest of furs and feathers, the harps and music boxes will start to overload your sense of hearing. In your state, you may welcome the chance to sleep, but snap out of it. Have you been watching the hourglass? Make sure his terrors aren't distracting you. This is why you don't talk to the Sandman. For every tiny detail about yourself you give him, he will use against you here. This is also the part where electronic displays can become a massive problem. They will turn on, regardless of whether they are powered or not, and should you gaze upon their mystifying image for too long, your eyelids will droop, and your body will collapse onto the floor. If you had just turned the screens away, the Sandman might use some muscle and turn it back towards you so you can get a better view. The curtains may open to a brilliant dawn or a clear blue sky, but the only truths in this room are your arm and the hourglass. Unless you have 8 marks, the game is not over. Use any ounce of strength you have to flip that hourglass. Now, an immense chore from the Sandman's influence. Scrawl a line down your arm with the marker, even if it looks like you're taking a knife and slashing your own arm open. During the final hour, the Sandman will begin to address you directly, asking you questions that appear to be simple, but as you are, you can't even remember what 2 + 2 equals. A question is the hardest thing to get out of your head, so don't let it get in. Cover your ears and just watch the hourglass. Keep those eyes open. Don't fall asleep. If the questions get in your head, you'll start to think about it, adding more stress and draining you of what little mental will you have left. It might become hard to breathe, as if something is squeezing your lungs, or the air is dense and hard to take. The Sandman will also get physical, grabbing you and throwing you across the room, leaving you to crawl back to the hourglass before time is up. If you catch a glimpse of his face, it may be enough of a nightmare to haunt you and keep your eyes from shutting. There will be no distinguishable facial features, save 2 bloody eyes, the lids torn from the sockets, endless staring. If you can't take it anymore at any point before the 8th hour is completed, take the hourglass and break it with all your might. Both sections must be broken for the game to end. For your sake, I hope it was made out of glass. Anyone who has made it to the 7th hour mark has never had the strength to successfully break it and either carried on or surrendered to their dreams. You will not receive a reward for ending the game this way, save the mercy of avoiding the Sandman's wrath. If you do not make it to the end of the 8th hour without falling asleep, you will not need to flip the hourglass again. Simply make the 8th mark on your arm and close your eyes. Though you ended the game, you cannot sleep just yet. There's one final task remaining. All you must do is wait for the Sandman to collect the hourglass and say, "You're all grown up now. Sleep when you wish." Open your eyes and find that the hourglass is gone and the candle put out. Now you may collapse in slumber, a 12-hour slumber to be precise. The game puts a heavy strain on your mind and body, so recovery is necessary. But it's the last sleep you'll ever need, or at least to that length, because once you've fully recovered, you will be able to stay awake for an extra hour for each tally on your marked arm. Depending on your normal sleep schedule, this may mean that you only need a small nap, maybe an hour or two at most, but for some, you'll never have to lie down again. Sure, you will have the ability to do so if you want to. You can even still dream, but there will never be any weariness following you. Just think of how productive you can be. But it's not all sugar plums and gumdrops. If you mark any tallies on your arm that was not marked by the hourglass, you will instead require more sleep. 1 hour for each tally on the blank arm to be precise. You will require more rest to be able to even function throughout your day. Now these marks can cancel with the ones on your marked arm, but if that's not the case, you may have just gone through all of that suffering only to come out worse than before. And what with your delirious state throughout the game, it's unlikely for the average individual to come out with all their tallies on the marked arm. There are also circumstances for losing. If you fail to flip the hourglass, then the Sandman will gain full power, and with a snap of his fingers, you will collapse to the ground. Regardless of how you fall asleep, be it by failure of the hourglass or succumbing to your own tiredness, you will also sleep for 12 hours to recover. But it will be the worst sleep you will ever have, and the Sandman will make damn sure that that's the case. The worst nightmares will fill your mind, leaving you unable to escape or wake up in a relief-filled cold sweat. All you can do is endure the torture of a dream that feels like years in length. And when you finally come to consciousness the next morning, there you will be, lying on the floor of the room, the marks still on your arm, and blood flowing from where your eyelids once rested. You said you refused to close your eyes and go to sleep. The Sandman has simply granted that wish. I swear it's pursuing me. I can feel its existence no matter where I go. I can always feel that wretched being breathing right down my neck. I can undyingly sense it watching down on me. With that face, or should I say, lack thereof. It's been pursuing me for years, ever since what happened to my family. That should not have happened to them. They did not deserve that. Anyways, I'm presently writing this in a low-priced motel somewhere in Indiana. Running is all I have understood for the last 15 years, or at least if it has been 15 years. All this started when my family and I moved in to Bethel, Ohio. I still remember it like it was yesterday. My family and I had moved around a lot since we came to Ohio, living with relatives mostly and changing schools every month. It took a toll on me. Now that I think about it, it took a toll on all of us. We were all ready to just settle down. My parents found this old house in the middle of town. It was a 2-story house with 3 bedrooms and 1 bathroom. I was told that it was a century old. There were 6 of us at the time. My family consisted of my 2 little brothers, my little sister, my parents, and I. It was all going smoothly, unpacking, and cleaning up the old dust. After living in the house for around 5 weeks, I started noticing small, but still very strange things around the house. Things like the sound of footsteps and doors closing by themselves. I did not give them any second thoughts though. However, I started getting alarmed when my little brother complained of nightmares about a man with a shadowy face choking him. The really strange thing is, he said that he still felt himself being choked. Not that much later, my mom had also experienced terrible things with that being. One day, she was just sitting on her bed when out of nowhere, she couldn't breathe on one side of her neck, like someone was choking her. All of a sudden, the pressure just stopped. I don't think I slept one sound night in that house after that day. The experience became progressively more alarming. In the following 2 weeks, we were terrorized by the strange spirit. Each morning, everyone would awaken with scratches. Well, everyone except for me. One time, it actually pushed my sister down the stairs. Things were getting too insane, so I decided to do a little research on the house. It turned out that a lot of people had died in that house, to the point where it temporarily even became a funeral home. I had noticed the corner of an old picture, so I pulled it out of the folder that it was contained in. It looked like it was from the early 1900s, but there was something not right about the picture. Something that I just could not put my finger on. I looked closer, and that's when I saw it. It was a man in a tuxedo, and his face was nothing but a shadow. It was standing behind a corner of the house, peeking out from the side. Just as I was getting up, there it was, standing inches from my face. I could feel its breath. It smelled of death and decay. I felt panic seep into my body, and I blacked out. The last thing I recalled was a very loud scream, followed by a very low-pitched laugh. When I woke up, I was alone. Not a soul was in that house. I searched for years for my family, but I just couldn't find them. I looked all over the fucking country, but inside, I know he took them. They are dead. With no doubt in my mind, I am the only survivor of my family. Why the hell am I still alive? I ask myself that question to this very day. So, that is where it leaves us now. I know that thing is just toying with me. It could take me anytime it wanted to, but I feel it just wants to see me suffer. I'm not going to give it the satisfaction, and I'm going to end it right here. So if anyone is still alive out there, anyone at all, I need to tell you that I'm sorry. I am so very, very sorry. The following is a written confession obtained by the FBI, which has been leaked to the public. Reader discretion is advised. Our mission: to give young people a chance to experience adulthood. Man, they make it sound noble. That's what I thought as I scrolled through the About section of IDLord.com, a site based in China, I believe, that sold fake IDs like hotcakes. It was surreal looking at something like this. Some site that sells phony driver's license to kids with inspiring sales copy. I was 18 at the time, and 4 of my friends and I wanted to get one of those group deals on fakes, $60 per person, something like that. If you went solo, it was north of 100, and since all of us were on board, we thought, what the hell. After doing some research on some shady sites on how to best concoct the info on your fake, I was ready to place my order. Step 1. Use your real first name, but a fake last name. This means that a bouncer won't toss you to the curb after your friends have been calling you Jake the whole time in line. Even though the name on your ID says Fabio or some shit. The fake last name, well, come on. No need to explain the reason for that. My real name is Jake Dalton, so I used the name Jake Norman on my fake ID. Step 2. Use the age 21. Though it's generic, it's a common age, and there are lots of people who are, in fact, 21. No need to stretch your age. Step 3. Your picture. Make sure there's even lighting. I actually once knew a guy who got busted because of his ID photo. Half of his face was covered in shadow. He had no idea, and why would he? He was a stupid 16-year-old. Step 4. The signature. Just make sure it looks like you're not in kindergarten. Oh, and make sure it's the fake name you came up with, and not your real name. Step 5. The address. This trips up some people. Some people make up a completely fake address, but then they don't remember it when a suspicious bouncer asks them. Instead, use your actual house number so you can remember it. Then, make the street a fake one and change the state to whichever state your ID says. Okay, easy enough. So, I got my fake in the mail, checking the mailbox profusely over the next couple of weeks to make sure my parents didn't intercept my package. And it looked great. I live in Asheville, North Carolina, and my fake ID was a Tennessee driver's license, the state which borders mine. I live at 308. So the address on my ID was a place in Tennessee called 308. Easy to remember. My friend and I, or should I say, Jake Norman, had a blast that Friday night. We got past bouncers. We bought cases of beer. We got into bars and did shots with our cash tips we'd gotten at work. It was great. My friend Sammy and I were chilling the following day, Saturday afternoon. We were sort of hungover and a bit bored, just watching stuff on YouTube and reading stuff on forums. As we go through 4chan, we come to find that there is a thread for ID Lord, the site we got our fakes from. We decided to click on it, see how other folks made out with their fake ID experiences. There were little minor complaints. The UV is a little high, or the signature looks stretched. There were glowing reviews too. And then, we came across something that was a bit odd. There was a subthread which was titled, "The address I made up for my ID is a real address. Anyone notice this?" What followed were a half-dozen comments claiming the same thing. Naturally, Sammy and I went and looked up the address I had made up. There it was, on Google Maps, 308 Whitebrook Lane, and in Tennessee no less. We thought maybe ID Lord used real addresses for realism, but surely that'd be illegal. I'm no law student, but that seemed like a form of impersonation. But there was one thing that really caught our attention. A few of the commenters claimed that the houses had money stashed in the floorboards, lots of it. People came up with theories as to why this might be. The most convincing was that maybe the houses were drug houses used by the same cartel that sold the fake IDs. Well, being broke high schoolers, Sammy and I were soon en route to the address, which was only a few hours from my house. It was sunset by the time we arrived. The house was a 2-story home in the hood, and it had a chain-link fence surrounding the property. A large oak tree stood in the backyard, looming over the house as if protecting it. Beyond that were some woods that stretched on into the next neighborhood over. Sammy and I got out of the car and headed for the property. The chain-link gate creaked as we opened it and stepped through. We walked across the overgrown dandelion-filled grass and went up to the doorstep and opened the screen door and knocked. No answer. We knocked several more times and still, no answer. "Dude," said Sammy, "let's fucking go in and look for the money." "Hell yeah," I replied. We went inside. The place had furniture in it, and it seemed as though someone was still living there. But everything was covered in a thick layer of dust, and we were never more than 3 feet away from a cobweb. So, we were fairly certain that the house hadn't been lived in. Still, we had our doubts. "I don't know, man," I said. "We might be trespassing." "Look," said Sammy, "I ain't passing up on a boatload of money. Let's tear this place up, find it, and get out of here. No one's lived here for years. Look." Sammy ran his finger across the mantle, displaying the wad of dust that had snowballed onto his fingertips, See? He said. Yeah, I replied. Alright, let's get to it. We tore the place up, threw up couch cushions, rummaged through drawers, peeled away molding, put holes in the walls. It was dark now, and we were about ready to give up and just go home. Then, that's when we heard something. It sounded like a television. Shit, dude, I said. Is that the damn TV? Sammy and I stared at each other with our jaws agape. Our shocked, open mouths were pits of darkness. Our eyes were bug's eyes. The sound of the TV was coming from upstairs. You think someone just left it on? Sammy asked stupidly. Oh my god, dude, I sighed. We're fucked. Probably some old person who can't hear a thing. Only one way to find out. Sammy and I crept up the stairs. Each step creaked, and each time it did, we winced like we had been pinched. Whatever was playing on the TV was a commercial, but I was pretty sure it was a super long infomercial, because it sounded like the same voice had been talking for the past few minutes. We got to the top step, and I, at the forefront, peeked around the corner and gazed down the dark hallway. The hall stretched for about 20 feet, and there was a door at the end. Blue light flickered beyond it. The TV, I presume, I whispered. Sammy and I crept down the hall. Excuse me, I called. Sammy shushed me and slapped my shoulder as his eyes went wide. The hell are you doing? He hissed. We're really sorry for being here, I said, ignoring Sammy. We thought the place was empty. We got the wrong house and... My voice drifted off as we listened for a response. Nothing. We arrived at the end of the hall and pushed the door open. The room was empty, but it was what played on the TV that was truly haunting. The TV was an OxyClean type infomercial with some guy shouting at the camera in an excited way. At ID Lord, we value you, the salesman shouted. You get to create a new you that is of legal age, a you that gets to party with the adults, get into clubs, or order beer at your favorite bar. Get together for a group purchase and get 50% off your... Sammy and I looked at each other with big eyeballs. What the fuck? I asked. Let's go, said Sammy. This is... We turned around and there he stood. Or should I say, there I stood. It was me. Even in the shadows, I could see that it was me that stood across from us. Either I had a twin, or something had occurred that was beyond my comprehension. I couldn't speak. I could barely breathe. I went into a state of paralysis by fear. Me, the other me, wore the same clothes I'd been wearing in my fake ID photo. The hair, that was the same too. Something else matched too. The facial expression. When I had gotten my photo taken, I just gave a little half smile. And that was the expression the other me had plastered to his face. Unmoving, unblinking, not even a twitch. Who are you? I said. Still holding the same facial expression, the other me spoke. You know who I am. You're me? No. You're Jake Dalton. Yeah. I'm Jake Norman. I was going to pay you a visit tonight, but it looks like you came to me. Before Sammy or I could do a thing, Jake Norman lunged for Sammy. My evil clone pounced on him like a tiger and bit into his neck. My god. The gargling sounds that erupted from Sammy's throat. That mix of screaming and bubbling blood. Sammy! I shouted. I tried to pull Jake Norman off of him, but the clone was as firm as a statue, and pulling on him was like trying to uproot one from the ground. I backed away and got ready to run, just as Jake Norman lifted his blood-stained head and glared at me. I shrieked and booked it towards the stairs. I glanced over my shoulder just in time to see other me roll onto his back, prop himself up, and proceed to spider walk after me. I fell down the stairs. The other me did that freaky spider walk down the steps faster than any human could go in that position. I yanked open the door, ran to my car, and hopped in. As I put the keys in the ignition, Jake Norman slammed his face against my window and pressed it to the glass, hissing as he ran his tongue along the glass. I started up the car and sped away. I went to the police immediately. I told the cops to go to the house and they'd find his body. When they did, they found nothing, not even a bloodstain. I was suspected for Sammy's disappearance. I was eventually exonerated, but everyone still looks at me like I did it. I know what everyone is thinking. They think I'm a murderer. I think I'm gonna have to move, probably to another state. But those are the least of my worries. Jake Norman is still out there, and, by God, he's coming for me. I know sooner or later, he'll come looking, and he'll find me. Fact is, I would have been better off in prison. So I discovered the meaning of life, or at least, that's what my eager customers are led to believe. You see, 2 or 3 times a month, I post a listing titled, The Meaning of Life, to various auction sites. I couple it with a sappy picture of a sunset or rainbow, and a description that reads, all views are subjective, results may vary. Most people wouldn't bat an eye at such a ridiculous listing. But there are some gullible folks out there that take the bait. When the bidding ends, I usually take home anywhere between $5 to $12. After I've received my money via PayPal, I ship out the item. What is the item, you might ask? Well, I scribbled down an inspirational quote or life lesson onto a piece of paper and mail it out in your standard letter-sized envelope. The quotes are usually from famous writers, historical figures, or the Bible. Some of them include, "If light is in your heart, you will find your way home," quoted from Rumi. People will forget what you said, people will forget what you did, but people will never forget how you made them feel, quoted from Maya Angelou. It's never too late to be what you might have been, quoted from George Eliot. And that's it. 1 stamp, a drop in the mailbox, and my work is done. It's as simple as that. You might call me a scammer or a con artist, or perhaps even a plagiarist, and in truth, you are correct. I'm taking advantage of the naive people out there who are possibly looking for a sense of purpose in life, also I can make a quick buck. But I'd like to think most people know it's fake and purchase it just to see what I'll send them. Besides, I'm a bachelor right out of college. As long as I can make a small dent in my phone bill and eat a packet of ramen each night, I'll sleep just fine. As you might imagine, I received quite a bit of hate mail. I've learned to ignore angry emails and private messages on auction sites. As soon as I see it's from one of my customers, it gets deleted. I do, however, receive the occasional snail mail. It's unavoidable as my P.O. box is listed on all of the envelopes I send out. It would be pretty easy for me to toss these letters in the trash with the rest of my junk mail, but I never can. Something about receiving a physical letter from someone, good or bad, compels me to read it. Anyone who takes the time to write one deserves to have their voice heard, even if I don't really care for what they have to say. The more and more letters I receive, the more and more amused I am by them. To paint a better picture, here's a few of my favorite quotes from the fan mail I've received over the years. You're nothing but a glorified fortune cookie service. You'll rot in hell for the sins you've committed, mark my words. You're a real fucking piece of shit, you know that? It's reached a point where reading these letters has become the highlight of my week. I've even tacked up some of the better ones on a corkboard in my bedroom. You might think that's sick and a little messed up, but I think it's hilarious. Not all of the letters I receive are bad though. There's one guy by the name of Big Red, like the gum I guess. That's all he ever writes above his return address, who mails me constantly. He sends me inspirational quotes in exchange for mine. I assume he's a repeat customer who actually enjoys paying for and receiving cheerful messages in his mailbox every now and again. The first quote Big Red ever sent me was, "The fear of death follows from the fear of life. A man who lives fully is prepared to die at any time," from Mark Twain. Though there was nothing else in the message, this was such a great first impression, as Mark Twain is one of my favorite authors. The quote was much appreciated. As such, I hung it up next to the hate mail on my corkboard. Another thing that's great about the quotes Big Red sends me is that I can re-gift them to my customers. It saves me time for looking for quotes online. It's true that I could send out the same quote more than once, but that just isn't my style. I like to think that there's a good chunk of people out there who enjoy the sayings I send them, and who might actually be repeat customers like Big Red. If so, I've got to have a little variety. Some of the things Big Red sends me, however, are not re-gift material. Some quotes he sends are morbid and depressing, and other times, he'll send me small packages containing little trinkets that I have no use for. It's a little weird, but I figure the guy is depressed and just needs a friend. Maybe the quotes he bought from me were the only thing he had to look forward to each morning. Perhaps the things he sends me are his way of saying thanks. To me, it's validation that what I'm doing isn't completely sleazy. But here's where things get weird. Today, I received another envelope from Big Red. I actually smiled when I pulled it out of my P.O. box. His letters and gifts were just as much, if not, more of a highlight to my week than the endlessly entertaining hate mail. Upon opening the envelope, my smile vanished. Inside was a photograph of me, taken up close through my bedroom window. On the back of the photograph was another one of Big Red's quotes. "You look so alone. Where's the meaning in your life?"